It was 1931, where a 32-year-old Jewish man named Irving Bromberg had just stepped down as president of the Greenpoint Motor Car Corporation of Brooklyn to create his own coin-op business known as the Irving Bromberg Company. Little did he know, this small company would become one of the biggest and most important video game companies of all time. Hey everyone, my name is Logan, and today let me share with you the story of Sega. Irving Bromberg had just opened up his new company, with his son Marty joining him soon after. From 1931 to 1933, they brought some of the first coin-op machines to Brooklyn, Boston, and Washington, D.C., including 1932's Whirl-Around Pinball machine. In 1933, Bromberg sold the New York branch of his company to Leon Taxon and moved to Los Angeles, California to form another branch of the Irving Bromberg Company. They continued to operate solely in Los Angeles until 1940, when World War II was just starting up. They soon realized that soldiers would need entertainment in their downtime, so Irving, Marty, along with family friend James Humphrey, created Standard Games in Honolulu, Hawaii to distribute coin-operated slot machines to military bases. In May of 1945, Bromberg, Marty, and Humphrey established a second Hawaiian coin-op distributor called California Games, which doesn't make too much sense since, they were in Hawaii and not California, but okay. Afterwards, they subsequently dissolved Standard Games that August. California Games was likewise terminated the next year, after which the three men established the company Service Games to replace it on September 1st, 1946. At the end of the war, the United States Army stopped operating slot machines and it sold its inventory back to Service Games. The three men then restored the machines and sold them for a profit. They continued with this operation until 1951, when the United States Senate passed the Transportation of Gambling Devices Act, outlawing all slot machines in the U.S. territories. So Marty Bromberg, now going as Marty Bromley, sent two of his employees, Richard Stewart and Ray Lamar, to Tokyo, Japan in 1952 to establish a new distributor. And thus, in 1953, Service Games of Japan was born. A year later, the five men established Service Games Panama to control its various entities. As time passed, they established distributors in South Korea, the Philippines, and in South Vietnam. So, you may be asking, where does the name Sega come from? Well, in about 1954, Service Games released the Diamond Star, under the company name Sega, which was an abbreviation of Service Games. Some sources do dispute this, however, saying that the Sega Bell and other machines released around this time actually came out first. But unfortunately, nobody knows the exact dates these slot machines were released, so it's just speculation. Either way, this is how Sega got its name. During 1954, Humphrey sold his share in Service Games back to Bromley and Bromberg at a price of $50,000 US per share. Richard Stewart and Ray Lamar later purchased shares from Bromley and Bromberg, resulting in an equal split among the four men for ownership of the company. As Service Games grew larger, it began to attract attention from the US and Japanese governments. While the company had managed to get out of charges of bribery and tax evasion between 1959 and 1960, Service Games was banned from all US Air Force bases in Japan and in the Philippines. On May 31st, 1960, Service Games of Japan was formally dissolved. A few days later, however, on June 3rd, 1960, two new companies were established to take over its business activities, Nihon Garaku Busan and Nihon Kiyaki Saizo. Kiyaki Saizo focused on manufacturing coin-op machines under the name Sega Incorporated, while Garaku Busan distributed machines particularly focusing on jukeboxes. Garaku Busan was run by Stewart, doing business as Automatic Inc. As part of the operations move, the two new companies purchased Service Games of Japan's assets. Meanwhile, Bromberg and Bromley sold Service Games Hawaii in 1961 for a price of $1.4 million US, but retained rights to the company name. In 1964, Nihon Garaku Busan and Nihon Kiyaki Saizo merged back together to form one company. David Rosen was an American officer in the United States Air Force Base stationed in Japan. During 1954, he launched a 2-minute photo booth business in Tokyo. This company eventually became Rosen Enterprises, and in 1957, it began importing coin-operated games to Japan. In 1965, Nihon Garaku Busan acquired Rosen's company to form Sega Enterprises Limited. Rosen was installed as CEO and managing director of this new company. According to Rosen, Sega was chosen as the brand name because that was the name that Nihon Garaku Busan was currently using, and because it had the most brand recognition at the time. Shortly after the merger, Sega stopped focusing on leasing slot machines to the military in order to become a publicly traded company of coin-operated amusement products. Products imported include Rockola jukeboxes, pinball games by Williams Manufacturing Company, as well as gun games by Midway Manufacturing. Because Sega imported second-hand machines that frequently required maintenance, Sega began the transition from an importing company to a manufacturing one. This started by staff constructing replacement guns and flippers for its imported games. According to former Sega director Akara Nagi, this led to Sega developing their own games as well. Sega's first game that they manufactured was the submarine simulator Periscope, released in 1965. The game was advanced in both graphics and sound for the time and became quite successful in Japan. It was also the first arcade game in the US to cost 25 cents per play. During this time, Sega made about 10 more arcade games that were exported to both the United States and Europe. However, piracy was rampant and forced Sega to stop exporting games for the time being. In 1969, Rosen sold Sega to an American conglomerate called Gulf and Western Industries in order to take the company public. Bromley and Stewart sold their shares, which equaled to 80% of the company, for a total of $10 million, while Lamar retained his 20%. As a condition of the sale, Rosen was to remain CEO of the company until at least 1972. 6 months later, with the deal done, Bromley joined with Stewart in order to form a company called Sega SA, sometimes referred to as Sega Sonic, in Spain, which imported coin-operated machines to Europe. In 1970, Gulf and Western placed Rosen at the head of a new company called Gulf and Western Far East Pacific that was headquartered in Hong Kong. Sega Enterprises Limited became a subsidiary of this new company, which Gulf and Western chairman Charles Bloodhorn hoped would become a powerful Asian conglomerate. The conglomerating attempt failed, but Rosen continued to develop a lasting relationship with Bloodhorn, who took Sega Enterprises Limited public in the United States in 1974 by making it a subsidiary of an existing publicly traded company owned by Gulf and Western, called the Polly Bergen Company. Rosen was appointed CEO of Polly Bergen, which was renamed Sega Enterprises Incorporated, and Sega Enterprises Limited Executive Vice President Harry Kane took control of day-to-day operations at the Japanese subsidiary. In July 1975, Sega Enterprises Incorporated opened a new North American sales and manufacturing subsidiary called Sega of America in Redondo Beach, California. Kane took charge of the subsidiary in 1976 and was replaced in Japan by a new executive vice president named Dane Blow. During 1973, Sega would release a Pong clone named Pongtron as its first video game. Sega profited heavily from the arcade gaming boom of the late 1970s, with revenues climbing to over $100 million by 1979. During this period, Sega acquired Gremlin Industries, a manufacturer of microprocessor-based arcade games. In 1979, Sega also acquired Esco Trading, founded and owned by Hayao Nakayama. This brought Nakayama into Sega Enterprises, where he was named Executive Vice President and shared leadership responsibilities with Dane Blau. Blau continued to run finance and administration, while Nakayama took charge of sales, marketing, and R&D. Rosen later admitted that he mainly purchased Esco Trading for Nakayama's leadership. In the early 1980s, Sega was one of the top 5 arcade game manufacturers active in the United States, as company revenues rose to $214 million. In 1979, the company released Head On, which introduced the Eat the Dots gameplay that Namco later used in Pac-Man. During 1981, Sega released and licensed Frogger, its most successful title up until then. In 1982, Sega introduced the first game with isometric graphics, Zaxxon. With these innovative hits, among others, Sega was quite profitable. But what happens after the arcade industry takes an economic downturn? And that's coming in part 2. Thank you guys so much for watching. It really means the world to me, and since this is my first time doing this, if you have anything you'd like to critique me on to make me better, please feel free to do so. And that's about all I have, so I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.